Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Learn Biz with Ethan Miliori, Ryan Murray. So today is kind of a fun coincidence. If you follow the podcast, either on any of the like Spotify or Apple Music, or if you we've recently expanded into YouTube, so if you follow us there. Last week we did an episode on contingency planning. And I actually really enjoyed this episode because it's very pertinent to small businesses. A lot of times they don't pay attention to some of the things that are actually going to affect them. And so, great episode. Really loved it. Well, so this last weekend, on Sunday, President Biden announces that he is not healthy enough to run. Now, here's the funny thing. Everyone knew he was, like, this did not shock a single person. Every single person knew that he was not healthy enough to be president of the United States. Yet, everyone's scrambling now. Now, I don't really want to go into the political side of this, but I want to look at the contingency planning side of this and just say, really? You're shocked that this guy who has the onset of Parkinson's for a couple years now in his 80s can't hold one of the most rigorous positions on planet Earth? Who is surprised? And so then they're like, well, now who's it going to be? Is it going to be, I think you say Kamala?
Yeah.
I've also heard Kamala, but
it's Harris.
Okay, so I'm going to say Kamala. So, why was anyone thinking, should it be Kamala? Honestly, this decision should have been made 2 years ago. Yeah. And they should have just gone forward, full bore, owned it, but they didn't. And so if the one of the two major political parties that is backed by millions, multi-millions of dollars, screws up contingency planning, then yes, it's a problem with small businesses.
but when you shared this idea with me, though, it was pretty profound because, too often in small business, we don't really think what happens to that person if they don't perform or something happens to them, right? What happens if our lead guy gets injured?
Yeah.
Okay. Because arguably, that's the argument you'd make is Biden at some level is injured and can't play.
Yeah.
Right. So what is your backup plan for that individual that comes in? But at the same time, who can pick up the pieces? Who's heavily cross-trained? I mean, this really leads to a lot of other thoughts when you talk about contingency planning on a bigger level, but is a great example that what should you be doing as a small business?
And I want to touch on those points, but I want to throw in one more thing. So 2 weeks ago, we did a review of Strategy Guide Map.
Right.
And again, so maybe I'm just getting giddy inside because it's all lining up and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just what we've been talking about. In Strategy Guide Map, one of the principles that Alan covered in the training that we were able to go to was that there is more opportunity in volatility.
Right.
And so I want...
Well, and to add to that, though, you need to understand this one. Economies are naturally volatile, not the other way around. Everyone talks about stability, but economies, because they're arguably more biological than they are mechanical, and we might have to do an episode to explain that, but because they're more biological, they're adapting, changing, adjusting, proactively and reactively. They're naturally volatile.
Yeah. So I want to marry these thoughts here real quick, and then we'll get into kind of some of the meat. Joe Biden, why do they go with him? Why does the Democratic Party stick with him as long as they did when everyone knows that he's not fit for the office? Well, they think to themselves, what's our best chance of winning? We have this guy, and this is where I want to relate it back to small business. How many times do you have a CEO who really is not the best person for the job, but you keep them in that spot for whatever reason? Maybe there's a legacy there, there's some loyalty there.
Family owned.
Yeah, they've got the right last name. And so you're keeping someone in a position that everyone in the company can see that, hey, this isn't the best thing to do. And why? Inherently, you're doing this because you want to keep stability as opposed to volatility.
Right.
But we know that there's opportunity in volatility. There's also risk. And so I get that there's some inherent risk. You put someone in and you put someone in as a CEO and they do a terrible job, and then there's huge risk to the company.
We probably ought to explain a little bit of why there's opportunity in volatility versus opportunity in stability.
Okay.
Because I don't know that.
Do you want to kick it off, or I've got a couple thoughts on it?
Well, I'll do the nutshell and then you share your thoughts as well. So ultimately, when there's stability, things are stable, things are going well, people are in places. When you look for opportunity, especially for growth of an organization, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm looking for new clients and I need to get my foot in the door, if that company is stable, they've had the guy there for 20 years, he has his own vendors, he has his way of doing things, right? It's really, really hard to get a new sales contract with that company to get them to switch who they're doing their work with because of you, because they've already been established doing that one.
Yeah.
But if that individual changes, it introduces volatility into that organization now. And so now you have an opportunity to exploit that and say, hey, look, we have a product that's actually better than what you're currently doing, because the new guy will actually give you the time of day where the old one doesn't. So that's just a small nutshell of,
And I want to I love that example, and I want to take it a little bit more tangible here just to make sure that people are understanding what we're talking about. So if I was in a new position and I had to go out, and I don't even have to be in the new position myself, but let's say that I'm in a sales position and I deal with business-to-business accounts. A common strategy that a lot of people will do is they'll get on a platform like LinkedIn, and they'll just do a query of people who have been in their position for like less than 6 months, because that person is naturally more open to hear what's out there than the person who's been in their position for 20 years. Now, obviously, there's some stereotyping here.
Right.
And so it's not like if you've been there for 6 months, you will make change. If you've been there for 20 years, you're rigid. No, but typically speaking, you're more open to change because you're already in change. And so yeah, and I guess that's where I wanted to just hit with volatility has already created change. And so as long as I'm changing in this aspect, I'm not as afraid to change in another aspect. And so I'm more open to look at things and say, okay, maybe I should really do some things. I think of, and this is kind of a silly example, but I think it illustrates volatility really well. Someone who's newly divorced, that's when they go out and they buy new wardrobe. They buy a motorcycle. They actually start eating healthy and get in shape. They pick up their hobby of painting that they've ignored for the last 20 years. And the funny thing is the spouse that they just divorced was asking for all of those things. And they wait until after they're divorced to finally start taking care of some of these things that would have helped salvage the marriage in the first place. Why? Because they needed the catalyst of change to make other changes.
Right.
They were so stuck in a negative routine that they couldn't see out of it.
Those routines for them and markets and economies create this perceived stability, right? And so when there's perceived stability, we're less likely to make radical changes. Mm-hmm. But in volatility, you're always on your edge, so you're always more hyper aware of what's going on around you.
Yeah. So, what do we as small businesses do? What's the advice that we're going to put out here on the episode today? One of the things that I want to hit on, I was reading a Forbes article, and it talked about it gave 14 characteristics of high performing teams. And one of those characteristics is diversification, that you have to have people on your team who are not like you. Now, I'm probably going to be offensive here for a second, but if you follow me through, it's not intended to be offensive. People think diversification is limited to things like race and gender, and I'm like, it's not. Look at diversification of history and culture and ideology. I mean, I can have someone who's got a different skin color than me that still thinks exactly like me. And so I don't care what skin color you are. That shouldn't actually have much of a bearing as to how successful you're going to be. Now, I will say that gender matters a lot more because men do think differently than women and vice versa.
But this is an interesting thing. So that thought just prompted me to remember. There's a book, I think it was Franz Johansson.
Okay.
I think it's Franz. Anyways, it's called the Mesidi effect.
Okay.
And basically the Mesidi was an Italian family in like the 14th or 15th century.
Oh, yeah. They established banking.
Yeah. Banking.
Okay.
So they were big bankers, but so they were using their influence as a banker to bring in artists and inventors and architects and other things. And what they found from what this Johansson guy coined is this, I think it's Medici. I think it's called the Medici effect. Mm-hmm. Is that when he started taking different cultures and industries and disciplines and introducing them and crossing their paths, more innovation took place.
Yeah.
Because of the diversity.
Exactly.
Right? So that's what started the Italian Renaissance, was because of him bringing in all these different various components of, art to industry to architecture to everything. And so when all of a sudden they started sharing ideas, they're like, oh, wait a minute. What you just said gave me a great idea, right? So they started crossbreeding all this stuff, and it just exploded the innovation in the area.
Mm-hmm. So your last name is Migliori.
Yeah,
you're supposed to be Italian.
I am.
And you don't know it's Medici? Medici.
Oh, yeah, the C would be a ch. Well, I don't speak Italian.
You just discredited that whole exact... But the thing that's really interesting is getting back to this idea of volatility. A lot of times people want stability and they look at diversity as a threat to the way that they're operating. Someone comes in and they're like, well, let's do this. And it's like, no, that's not how we do things here. And I actually, I'm going to put it out there. All right.
Well, we can cut it out if you.
No, I'm putting it out there. So I worked for a guy for a very short period of time, 4 months. I worked for him, and he had an aversion to the color green. And I knew that this was an illogical aversion. And so I purposely wore a green shirt, and he got all offended at me. And I'm like, I'm actually trying to help you here.
Is this a true story?
This is a true story. Yeah, I ended up getting fired. I'm not surprised that the one time in my life that I've ever been fired from anything.
It's like all those movies where the villain or the good guy is trying to oust the villain, and so everyone starts wearing the same mask. You know what I mean?
Well,
to just disturb them.
Honestly, this guy thought that I was making fun of him because he's like, that I have a bad association with the color green. And I'm like, guess what? The color green's not going anywhere. And so
did he like the outdoors?
I don't know. He worked a lot, so I don't know that he spent a lot of time in the outdoors.
Okay.
And so it's just this idea of when I came in, my version of change was too radical with silly things like wearing green shirts. And I'm still aware of that company today. They haven't done anything impressive over several years. They've kind of floundered. And I'm like, well, I'm not surprised because you guys can't get past simple things. Simple was the word I used. But
I'm starting to get criteria.
But this idea of when something happens, when volatility hits, man, that's when a smart entrepreneur should be pouncing on that opportunity. And I think, so I'm going to go back to the Biden thing.
But so hold your thought.
Okay.
But here's the thing that is crazy is that when things get a little bit volatile, instead of being more aggressive, too many entrepreneurs actually back down and double down. Ooh, I can't screw this. This too risky, right?
Right.
Not understanding, no. There's more opportunity.
The door just opened, guys.
Yeah.
Like, so I look at Harris right now, and I think she's playing her cards really, really well because her fundraising is on fire. Right. And so I'm looking at that and I'm just like, yeah, she got it. She understood that it's now or never. And everyone's like, oh, this is unprecedented. What are we going to do? Which, again, cracks me up because I'm like, look, he was either not going to make it through the elections, or if he got elected, he was going to die in office. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be disrespectful here. But the guy's not healthy. He's not doing well. And so I'm like, well, you're either voting for Harris directly or indirectly. Now it's just out in the open.
Right.
And so taking that volatility... And okay, so let's be fair to both sides. Not trying to get political here, but the assassination attempt on Trump,
right,
increased
his popularity.
Right? Yeah, it was excellent for his voting base because people saw that and they're just like, "Oh, what a real leader!" The guy just got shot in the ear. And you would think, what a terrible thing. And human nature would say, okay, hide, don't do anything about it. What does he do? He puts his fist up in the air.
Fist pumps. I know.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to get political here, but I'm trying to illustrate a point.
He was like, I got 4 guys around me. They can't get a bullet through them now. I'm safe.
Yeah. I'm sorry. He's like the most arrogant person. Period.
I'm not a fan of our national political leaders right now.
I'm not either.
Sorry. And we're trying not to keep this political, but it's so frustrating that
the debates were a joke. And it was volatility that brought someone in. So unfortunately, I cannot say much about whether I like Harris or not. I don't know enough about her.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that it's actually bringing a debate back into what it...
Well, and I like the fact that the volatility of it is, we drive about this all the time. It's forcing people to go actually look at data and facts.
Yeah.
Right? Because data and facts is what drives a business. When you get into GIS stuff, that's what we're looking at. Demographics, psychographics, retail sales reports. I mean, we're looking at all this data to help us make better decisions on what's coming up so that we have the right contingency plan. Mm-hmm. See, most people think contingency plan, I'm just trying to safeguard, but no, contingency planning is also about structuring properly for the future, which now becomes a contingency at a level is somewhat of a strategic plan.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, I don't know that I was going to go too much deeper on that. I think probably a little bit shorter than some of the other episodes we've done. But just to illustrate the point that it's when change is inevitable, get in front of it. The contingency plan, the strategic plan. Don't be afraid, even though you have someone in a key position, and whether that's CEO or whether that's COO or CFO, and I mean, it could be VP of finance. I'm not getting hung up on the C-suite here. I'm saying if you have someone in a key position, don't keep them in there too long. They're perishable. It's like guests, fish, and CEOs start to reek after 3 days.
Yeah, start smelling the same, like a fish tank.
And so, get in front of it, embrace the volatility, find the opportunity in the volatility, I mean, how many of our powerhouse businesses that are around today came out of the Great Depression or exploded during the Great Depression?
Oh, yeah.
And it's amazing if you start looking at like the Dow 30 and how many of those really grew in the worst economic time of the last century.
Well, and that's an interesting point, because when you look at the Dow 30, I think, I'm not going to get the number exactly right, but about half of them have gone through some mergers or name changes, but they're still, the original traces of those companies are still in that Dow 30.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I saw some stuff on it one time, because there's been some name changes and some mergers, but the parent companies of some of those have actually made it clear through and still exist in some form or another that are considered part of that Power 30.
Yeah. And so, it's the companies that are embracing volatility, that are using it to move forward, that are creating legacies, and the ones that are complaining about it are fizzling away.
Well, so, and here's, I guess I'd put out a tip as well. Chris Gibbons teaches that when volatility is going on, there's water holes, meaning, in a desert, everything comes to the water hole. So if you want to know what's going on, watch the water hole, because everything has to come in and get a drink at some point in time. And so learning inside of your industry or industries you're interested in, what those watering holes are, so that you can see what other companies are doing as well, or what information is coming out, so that you're getting good information, because you're actually literally watching the water hole. You know what I mean? I know what's coming in to get a drink from there. I know when it's coming in. I know how often it's coming in, right? So I can have, because of that, if I have these listening posts on these water hole watching, in the hunting world, they, use trail cams, game cameras. So they see when's coming in and what's going on, so they can have some level of predictability of what's going on. Well, that's the exact same principle that these watering holes and listening posts are trying to do, but for your industry, is what is really going on. And there's actually some really good publications in almost every industry that you can follow that has fantastic information what's going on. And some of those economists or industry experts, they're pretty spot on a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fascinating.
Which is crazy that we start the episode with saying economies are volatile by nature, but yet there's people who study enough, they know how they grow, right? I know how grass spreads, so hence I know how to control it.
Right.
I know where weeds can grow and where they can't grow, because I've watched them long enough that I know how to control them.
We need to do an episode on expertise. I think that's fascinating. But I'm good now. I don't know if there's anything else you want to cover in this episode.
No, I just, I think the point that I would share if I had a closing remark.
You do have a closing remark. It's right now. The stage is yours.
The closing remark is that when we talk about contingency plans, there's a piece of it that I think I wanted to share from this one, is that contingency plans have to be strategic and proactive as well.
Yeah.
Not just buckling down.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway. And so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks so much for joining us. If you like this content, you can find all of our learning content on JazzJune it's jazzjune.com/learnbiz is where we actually have some of our premium content. And so go ahead and check that out. Or you can reach out to us, Ryan or Ethan at learnbiz.co. And we will catch you next time.